Hi, my name is John Reed, and I am the founder and director of Former Atheist Ministries. And today I'd like to talk a little bit about how science presupposes God. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there talking about arguments and whatnot, and your time is precious, and you have a lot to choose from, so why should you listen to me, first of all? And although I believe my arguments will stand on their own, it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of credibility to sort of explain who I am and why you might want to listen to me. Well, I could tell you that I do a lot of radar signal processing for my job, but many of you would not understand what that is. And so I'll tell you what I used to do because it's readily understandable by the vast majority of the population, and that is that I used to be a rocket scientist. Uh, and so with that, I will go into the argument itself. The argument is based off what's called the uniformity of nature. Now, the uniformity of nature briefly states that the future will look like the past. Now, at first glance, it may not be obvious why the atheist would have a problem with this or explaining this. But why should the future look like the past? See, with Christianity, there's a God who is omnipotent, so he's able to make the constants of nature, and gravity, to be as they are and stable. And since God does not lie, we can trust his word, and his word tells us that this is the case. It didn't have to be. He could have chosen to make it random and change, fluctuate, but he didn't. And so Christianity explains is a explanation of how the constants of the nature are in fact uniform. But on the other side, the atheist side, will try to explain that either it just is, but that's usually not their main argument because they recognize that for science to be a rational claim to knowledge, that you need justification. And philosophers will argue on what it takes for something to become knowledge, but no rational being will deny that justification is part of that. And so there has got to be justification. And the atheist will turn to the inductive argument, which says that it's a probabilistic argument that says that since we have a lot of data that says this is the case, the majority of the data says that this is the case, therefore the future can be reasonably expected to continue the trend. But the problem with that is do we really know that all the data says this? All we really know is all the data we have, which is very little compared to the beginning of time. So even operating on a young Earth view, as very conservative Christians say, the universe is 6,000 years old. That's still a lot of time where we don't have any data, let alone an age of the universe of 15 billion years. But even if we restricted ourselves to the past 200 years, have we really continuously measured the speed of light for the last 200 years? No. And furthermore, the uniformity of nature is more than just that the future will look like the past. It also states that things like the mass of an electron is uniform. That is, that all electrons have the same mass. But we haven't measured the mass of an electron in the other galaxies. And so we have no data on that. And so what the atheist is left with is an assumption. He just assumes it is. He has no reason for believing it. And now it could be the case that is, but without that knowledge of saying yes it is or no it's not, that leaves science without any justification because the uniformity of nature is an ad hoc assumption. Whereas on the Christian worldview, we have a good reason to hold to that because our God tells us this is the case. Now that may be an assumption, but the uniformity of nature is not part of that assumption. That is, that it's not part of the being of God. And so, if Christianity is true, then the uniformity of nature, uh, we can be sure of that. But on the atheist worldview, he has to assume that. Now, you may say, well, what's so bad about that? Well, for one reason, it does leave him without science as being a source of knowledge, which the atheists use via evolution and many other things to deny God, deny Christianity. But using science as a source of knowledge is consistent with Christianity, not atheism, because they're assuming it. And furthermore, atheists believe in a random universe, that the constants of nature being finely tuned as they are to support life was by chance. It just happened to turn out that way. But chance and uniformity are contradictory to one another. It's like going to the gambling tables in Vegas and rolling a 7 1,000 times in a row. Somebody's going to say, I don't think so. The dice are loaded. um, and that's what we find. It's not just that the constants of the universe are so finely tuned, it's that they're always like that. Second after second, millisecond after millisecond, they don't change. Gravity doesn't change. It never has. For the So that's sort of what they're arguing for. Now, we don't know that. Could be, like I said, we haven't measured continuously. But science operates on that principle. And so the atheist is left with a big problem in explaining that. And I would argue that in using science at all, the atheist is living according to the Christian worldview. In future broadcasts, I will be talking about objections to this, such as miracles contradict uniformity and whatnot. For more information on this, you can look on my website at www.formeratheist.org. Thank you for listening, and again, I'm John Reed, and you have been listening to Former Atheist Ministries.